Yes, a screen, not yet.
So good morning and good evening, everyone. We're very excited to have you all with us today. We're just going to hold on another moment while attendees come in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. So I think most of our attendees have come in. I'm going to just give a very brief logistics note as we get started and then turn things over to our CEO, Brian Finley. So my name is Courtney Weatherby. I'm going to be helping to moderate the Q&A session today. So to all of our attendees, if you have questions throughout the discussion, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A function and I will collect them and work with Gwen to have them brought into the discussion at the end of the session. We'll do our best to try and answer all of the many questions that I'm sure you have. And I'll type instructions into the chat as well for anyone who needs further guidance. But without further ado, I think most of our attendees are here. So Brian, I'm going to hand things over to you to get started.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Very grateful for all your support in pulling this together. And a very warm welcome to all of our distinguished guests, panelists, to all of you that are tuning in. Good morning, good evening from wherever you are joining from. My name is Brian Finley. I'm the president and CEO at the Stimson Center. This is a big day for us, and I'm so pleased to see such a large crowd of government officials, of industry representatives, civil society representatives, and other stakeholders from literally around the world joining us here today for the launch of the Mekong Dam Monitor. The Stimson Center, as you may be aware, has a 30-year track record working on a broad range of issues, not just in the region, but well beyond. And many of you know, I hope that Stimson has a special place in its heart, really, for the Mekong region. Our Southeast Asia team has been working diligently for 15 years or more to promote sustainable development and natural resource management across the Mekong. Through our years of engagement, one of the greatest challenges I think that has been identified by regional stakeholders was the data and accountability gap, if you will, surrounding hydropower development up and down the Mekong. It is, in my view, at once an environmental and biodiversity issue, a development issue, an economic issue, a food security issue, and of course, a regional security issue. Our Southeast Asia team's goal, I think, in creating the Mekong Dam Monitor that you will learn more about here today was really twofold. First, it will, we hope, increase transparency and equip stakeholders with freely available data on what is happening with hydropower development and water resource management around the Mekong Basin. And in that regard, this platform will complement what is already available, I think, through the Mekong River Commission. And second, the platform that you will see not only provides unprecedented, really, insights into dam developments and operations, but it identifies an approach that can be used for analysis of rivers and bodies of water, really worldwide. And so in that regard, we're really grateful for funding from the U.S. Department of State, Assistant Secretary Stilwell. Thank you for being here today, as well as the Chino Siniega Foundation, as well as a host of individual donors that help contribute to bringing this effort to fruition. I'm really pleased that our donors, have likewise seen the value in this data platform. If I may just for 1 minute hold up the team here at Stimson that I'm particularly proud of and worked so diligently on this important initiative. They are our senior fellow and director of our Southeast Asia program. We call him Professor Mekong here at Stimson because of his deep and truly personal commitment to the region, Brian Eiler. Thank you, sir, and congratulations, Brian. His colleague, of course, needs no introduction, Courtney Weatherby, who, again, played a really pivotal role in bringing this important effort to fruition for us. And I would also like to hold up Alison Carr, who has done so much of the heavy lifting on the research that brought this effort to reality. And last, and certainly not least, I do want to recognize the keystone contributions of Richard Cronin, who helped to seed this work at Stimson some 15 or 20 years ago. And I know he is proudly rooting us all on from the sidelines. And with that, I want to introduce you all to our moderator, Gwen Robinson. Gwen is the editor-at-large of Nikkei Asia, and she is also the president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Taiwan. We're very privileged to have you do this for us. Gwen, she is joining us from Bangkok to moderate the discussion with our distinguished speakers from around the Mekong region. Gwen, as I say, I'm really grateful to you for your willingness to do this today on behalf of all of us. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, and without further ado, I give you Gwen Robinson.
Thanks so much, Brian. And just to very minor correction, I'm president of the Foreign Correspondents Club in Thailand rather than Taiwan, although I worry about the whole region. Anyway, good evening to all in the US, afternoon in Europe, and good morning, Asia. This event, as you're well aware already, marks the launch by the Stimson Center and partners of the Mekong Dam Monitor. You're going to hear a lot about it, so I'll leave it as at that. But just to make this point, particularly as I'm sitting in the center of this region, as many of you know, the Mekong region has suffered 2 continuous years of drought, and Mekong watchers particularly here worry that the river, which provides natural resources to many tens of millions in the Mekong Basin region, is steadily dying and has actually passed a point of no return. Brian's book really about the Mekong really galvanized, I think, a lot of attention and added momentum to what this project that we're launching today. So earlier this year, we learned a lot about the work of Eyes on Earth, run by Alan Bassis and his partners, and Stimson, about the impact of upstream dams on the downstream region here and their exacerbating effects on drought and flooding. Well, from today onwards, the Mekong Dam Monitor promises to provide free and frequent updates on how dams are impacting the health of the river. We've convened expert panelists and critically important stakeholders here to talk about the conditions of the river and also give their initial impressions and view on how this Mekong Dam Monitor can improve transparency and a fairer share of water for the basin. To launch this session, I'll briefly run through our order of speaking. We'll shortly hear from distinguished keynote speakers, US Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, David R. Stilwell, and Dr. Somkiat Prajamwong, Thailand's top Mekong official. They'll be followed by the project leads, Brian Eiler from Stimson and Alan Bassis, a former US government scientist and climatologist, who will talk about their objectives and use the platform to tell us a few stories unfolding in the Mekong region. Following that, we'll hear from a distinguished panel of representatives from each Mekong country, and they'll provide responses, pose a few questions about how the Mekong Dam Monitor can be put to use in the region. Just 2 very quick logistical points. I'm reminding you that we are on record, and if you would like to ask questions to the presenters, feel free to post on the Q&A line on this platform anytime in the session. We can field your questions after the speaker presentations. First, though, I'm very honored to introduce David R. Stilwell, US Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. And a very quick word here. Before his appointment as Assistant Secretary in mid-2019, he served in the US Air Force for 35 years, first as an enlisted Korean linguist in 1980 and retiring in 2015 in the rank of Brigadier General as Asia Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But during his tenure as Assistant Secretary, although it's been short, he has become a real champion of Mekong efforts, overseeing the recent upgrade of the Lower Mekong Initiative of the US and Mekong countries into the new Mekong-US partnership, and firmly placing the Mekong region close to the center of US foreign policy focus. So Assistant Secretary Stilwell, thank you for calling in from the State Department. The screen is yours.
Thanks, Gwen. Thanks for everybody for the chance to talk about probably the one issue that I have spent the most time on outside of managing a newly resurgent China. But ASEAN is a value in and of itself, and it also poses great opportunities with respect to issues that touch on China. I believe we'll hit on that a little bit tonight. But again, I just want to quickly identify where we are on all this and try to assure everyone that this, no matter what happens in the White House, that this policy will continue because it affects American interests too. So I do want to acknowledge the tremendous commitment, vision, innovation, and passion of everyone involved in this project, the Mekong Dam Monitor. And we've heard all of that just now during the intros. Your partnership, I mean, there's only so much the government can do. Generally, we can provide resources, but we can't do the work. And you guys are experts at this, and you do a magnificent job. Really want to thank Dr. Somkiat, a real Mekong River governance champion. We worked in this virtual sense the last time we were speaking about the Mekong. You've shown real leadership, not just for Thailand, but for the wider region, in voicing our shared concerns with hydropower dam operations and flood and drought risks, limits to navigation, fish movement, economic connectivity, food, environment, and all the rest. So thank you for being a dedicated champion. Please keep up your excellent work, and you know you have a friend here in the U.S. To support this Mekong's continued prosperity. So the Mekong-U.S. partnership has grown considerably since this partnership in general has grown considerably since we started this in 2009. We just upgraded, as we said, to the Mekong-U.S. partnership, committing in the process $3.5 billion in foreign assistance to the region, as well as billions of dollars of U.S. private sector investment, which again is as important or more important than what the government can provide. A lot of times what we provide is pump priming resources that then Western U.S. and other industrial partners can use. In September, we did upgrade the cooperation by launching the Mekong-U.S. partnership. And this dam monitor project shows the power of this affiliation in this project. So thank you for that. Challenges in the region. I'm not going to spend a lot of time admiring the problem. I think we all know what that is, and it's been detailed. But let me just point out that in April, there was a groundbreaking study by independent consultant Eyes on Earth that showed that the PRC was withholding water for the region, and as mentioned, during a critical time of drought. This study revealed that their Chinese dams are restricting lots of water in order to recharge hydropower plants, which again turns into financing and money and profit for the Chinese side. So that's just unfortunate. You add the drought to that, and it really exacerbates the issues. So these issues and these impacts have continued into this year, which, by the way, is further exacerbated by a pandemic with a similar culprit. But look at Tonle Sap Lake in Cambodia. Images, satellite images from April through August revealed that the lake drained to a really unusually low water level for the season, showing never before seen shorelines and fish catch reduction by almost 90%. And so the impact of all this must be addressed, and it will be addressed when ASEAN and others find their voice. So the solution to all this, that was a problem. The solution is easy. It's transparency. It's joining together to insist on getting transparency, and when we don't get it, find innovative and creative ways of doing that. And this is a very this is a great project to do that, using satellite and other data to expose the withholding of water. For the first time, the Mekong River Commission and all the residents of the Mekong will have a comprehensive approximation of the operations and impacts of the mainstream dams on the upper and lower portions of the Mekong. So through open source imagery, the monitor allows us to see reservoirs filling, including those behind China's great Xiaowan Dam and even bigger Nuojiazhu Dam. And together, these two reservoirs hold enough water to service all 8.3 million residents in New York City for 35 years. This is not an insignificant amount of water. So this monitor builds on the Eyes on Earth study, as I said, proving again that China's 11 mainstream dams are coordinated to maximize production of hydropower for China's use with zero consultation and little consideration given to those who suffer its effects downstream. Publicly available information puts critical information about water availability into the hands of the people who need it most, help make decisions that impacts livelihoods and regional security. Newly available approximations of reservoir heights, dam operations, and climate conditions will be updated regularly and validated and standardized to enable easy access and accurate analysis over time. The Mekong Dam Monitor complements the regional leadership of the Mekong River Commission. That's an important point. It also better equips Mekong regional leaders to assess trade-offs and take appropriate action to mitigate risks to the Mekong River Basin. Importantly, the Mekong Dam Monitor adds to the open collaborative work already underway as part of the Mekong-US Partnership's Mekong Water Data Initiative by facilitating the exchange of best practices, promoting development partner coordination, and strengthening Mekong governance and local communities' prosperity through sustainably managed shared water resources. The U.S. has long supported Mekong communities' calls for expanded water data availability. And we will continue to partner with the Mekong River Commission, your national governments and local authorities to strengthen capacity to access and use the best available data to advance science-based decision-making. And we will continue to support the calls of Mekong states and the Mekong River Commission for even more transparency from Beijing. You know, you can't cover this stuff up. The information will get out, and it's better if you offer it rather than have it extracted. You may have seen reports that China recently agreed to share more water data, specifically year-round data from 2 hydrological stations in Yunnan province, an extension of a previous data sharing agreement in which Beijing shared only wet season data from these 2 stations. And so I'd encourage our Mekong partners to press for even more information. Experts say the new data is limited in scope. It does not include, for example, information on upstream dam operations that Mekong countries need to manage agriculture and other industries that impact livelihoods. There's also concern about the quality of the data that Beijing shares. In sum, Beijing needs to do better. We support Mekong governments as they encourage China to increase transparency in its use of the Mekong River waters. And I'll point to the outbreak of the pandemic in Wuhan back in January or December, a year ago, when they silenced a doctor who tried to demonstrate transparency by identifying the problem. We have a problem with transparency with northern neighbor, and we're doing our best to improve that. So in closing, the Mekong-US Partnership is committed to secure, open, and prosperous Mekong region. We understand transparency and trust are at the heart of sound water management, and we're pleased to offer this Mekong Dam Monitor as further evidence of US commitment. We look forward to continued partnerships with Mekong states and societies. In nearly all we do, we will cooperate with other states who share our values-based approach, such as important partners Japan, Australia, India, and the Republic of Korea. And that's another great testament, is this is a shared interest. It's not just the US. That should put your hearts at ease. We look forward to doing more in the Mekong with ASEAN. There's strength in ASEAN's collective voice, not just the 5 Mekong states, but to get everyone saying the same thing. We encourage ASEAN to develop a common position on the Mekong Basin, as it has since 2012 on the South China Sea. The threat to ASEAN unity arising from the Mekong region is no less existential. The 5 countries of the Mekong region have committed and constructive are partners with the US. Through the Mekong-US Partnership, the broader Friends of the Mekong, and the US-ASEAN Strategic Partnership, we look forward to your continuing our efforts long into the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Stillwell, for raising some highly relevant points. And I think some thoughts for later on, including your urging ASEAN to come up with a common position, which is really maybe the next challenge. Actually, just before we let you go, and I'm aware we're short on time, but in your mention of China, I'd also really like to ask, I think some critics have said that this monitor could actually add to US-China tensions, but others have pointed out that this, even this very small gesture of data sharing, whether it's insufficient or inadequate data, could be a hopeful sign for the future. What's your view on the overall effect on US-China relations? Or
That's
maybe China doesn't care?
You have to call them on everything. And this is just a normal expectation of any upstream country. I spent time in Turkey in the Air Force, and there was issues there with downstream rights going through, Syria, Israel, Iraq, et cetera. So China may squawk. As I mentioned earlier, there's strength in numbers. Having all of ASEAN, or definitely the Mekong states, and then US allies, Australia, Japan, and Korea, all joining in to resist has been very effective in my 18 months, and I think it will continue to be effective. The point is that the interests of 5 downstream states are just as important as the interests of China as the headwaters. And I will note that what we've done so far on transparency on the water issue has not gone unnoticed in India. And in my recent visit there, they were very grateful for what we're doing. And we hope to extend what we're doing with Mekong countries to the main headwater rivers in the Brahmaputra and the Ganges for India as well. This is an important lesson that China needs to learn. Thanks.
Thanks, Gwen. We might have lost you. I guess to keep things moving on, I want to I'll help moderate while Gwen comes back into the session. Assistant Secretary Stillwell, thank you very much for those remarks. Again, my name is Brian Eiler. I'm the Director of Stimson Center Southeast Asia Program. And I want to personally thank you.
Brian, I'm back.
Okay, thank you, Gwen.
Hi. I'm back.
We can hear you, Gwen. It seems like Gwen is still having some technical problems, but again, Assistant Secretary Stillwell, really want to thank you for your tenure as a Mekong champion and putting the Mekong on the map for America. And we look forward to your future work in the Mekong.
Hi,
thank you again.
Sorry, Brian, I'm back.
Thanks, Gwen.
Yeah, apologies. I'm very sorry to have dropped out of that very interesting comment by the Assistant Secretary, but I presume now we're turning to our next keynote speaker. Have you introduced Dr. Somkiat, or can I?
I have not. Thank you, Gwen.
Well, in that case, everyone, apologies for that. But I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Somkiat Prajamwong, Secretary General of the Thailand Office of National Water Resources and Chairperson of the Mekong River Commission Joint Council in 2020. And as you've heard, probably one of the most important Mekong officials involved in the region. And lately, Dr. Somkiat has accurately pointed out the potential downstream damaging effects of adding new dams to the mainstream. So, Dr. Somkiat, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Sawasdee krap, good morning from Bangkok, Thailand. It's my great honor to be here as the keynote speaker on the launching events of the Mekong Dam Monitors, which is under the cooperation of the Mekong-US Partnership. May I recall that last October, I also had the chance to deliver a few remarks at the Indo-Pacific Conference on the strengthening governance of the Trans-Barrier Rivers, which for its names reflects the good intention for the Trans-Barrier water management. As the Secretary General of the Office of the National Water Resource of the Thailand and the Vice President, Vice Chairman of the Thai National Mekong Committee, I once again welcome the opportunity to engage in the momentum event arranged by the U.S. government. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the concerned agency for the effort to implement their approach of basin-wide water management, aiming to raise the accountability of all stakeholders sharing the same river. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to mark the today event, I congratulate the Mekong-US Partnership for the significant step forward in improving the platform called the Mekong Dam Monitor, which is the mechanism to create the transparency among the water users of this sub-basin. This positive implementation will lead to security of water and bring the sustainable development for the Mekong River. What makes me saying like this, in light of the historic low level of the Mekong River observed in 2019, Thai people residing along the Mekong River encounter the severe drought, leading to our growing more and more of severe concern. As a consequence, it has negatively affected both directly and indirectly the sustainable social and economic progress of not only Thailand, but also the other members of the Mekong countries. According to the statement of our council members at the meeting of the MRC ministerial level last month, Thailand emphasized the balance that ensure the prosperity of the economies, the safety of people and environment should be inclusive at its sub-basin. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that through promoting the engagement in the water governance, which is the core of sharing benefit in equitable way, and the integration of the related cooperation at the intra and inter-level based on the innovative and scientific approach will provide opportunity and challenge for the Mekong River countries to harmonize their people, cultures, economies, and environment in a good blending, thus creating this river to be the river of prosperity and peace. ขอบคุณครับ Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Somkiat, for those insights. Look forward to hearing more from you in our question and answer session. Now for an overview of the actual Mekong Dam Monitor and its objectives, I'd like to turn the floor over to the project's co-leads, Brian Eiler, Stimson Center Southeast Asia Program Director, and Alan Bassis, President, Eyes on Earth. Over to you.
Thank you, Gwen. And again, extended thank you to all of you for joining us from all over the world tonight. Our keynote speakers and panelists are sitting in different time zones, different parts of the world, and you know, it's a testimony to the spirit of the Mekong that has really brought us all together. It's with great pleasure that my team, the team of the Stimson Center and Eyes on Earth, our team, we present the Mekong Dam Monitor to you all today. Today, Mekong time, and tonight, Eastern Standard Time. And I know I speak for the project team when I say that we believe the platform that we've put together will help improve environmental outcomes in the Mekong Basin and strengthen transboundary river governance. There's a really long list of individuals who have helped make this platform come together. It's so long, we don't have time to name all of them, but I want to thank and recognize a few of them. First, with our funding supporters. We're very grateful to the Mekong U.S. Partnership at the Department of State and all there who have provided moral support over the last few months. We couldn't do this without you. The Chino Cienega Foundation, a small foundation in Southern California that provided seed funding for the Stimson Center Southeast Asia program way back in 2006 and never lost faith, supporting us ever since. Thank you so much. And as Brian Finley mentioned, my mentor and predecessor, Dr. Richard Cronin, who's also provided some funding support for the platform. We're very grateful to all of you and for seeding the funding for this pilot program for the Mekong Dam Monitor. I want to thank those who have contributed to the process as well, to building out this platform, the project team, both the Stimson Center and Eyes on Earth. Alan Bassis, it's been a real pleasure working with you and Claude Williams from day one. That day one was the day that we all decided to take transparency in the Mekong to a new level earlier this year, back when we could actually meet in person, which we did. And we haven't seen each other in person since, but we certainly have spent a lot of time on Zoom working together to take the transparency in the Mekong even higher. I want to thank our advisory board, who you can find out who they are on our webpage. Our advisory board has provided critical assistance over the last months and will help govern the platform into the future. The builder of our platform is Blue Raster, led by Eric Ashcroft and his team. And we also couldn't do this without the computing power at Esri. My old friend Salim Sawoya and Eric Lovell, who introduced the power of GIS to our team many years ago. And finally, Brian Finley, Dave Solomini, Katie Goodman, others at the Stimson Center who have helped see us through and take us forward. My thanks go out to you. So to get the platform off on the right pathway, we held focus groups with key government and non-government stakeholders in the region. And we're really grateful to the Mekong River Commission, to the National Mekong Committees with which we engaged, and non-government champions on the Save the Mekong Coalition, some of whom are on our panel tonight, like my Mekong hero, Niwat Roykau. We want to thank you all for your suggestions through this process. We engaged you in a very unofficial capacity for that feedback and that consultation, and we look forward to further collaboration through either official or unofficial channels in the future. So how did this come about? I mean, we've known a long time that dams have had impacts on the downstream of the Mekong, and we've also known, and we're really getting to know now, that the Mekong Basin is further at risk, and with many wondering if it's reached a point of no return with its ecological provisions to the region and its important hydrological cycle. Prior to the release of the April Eyes on Earth report, I remember getting phone calls from reporters amidst the drought of 2019, asking, where are these impacts coming from? Are they climate factors? Is it weather? Is it dams? And my answer was always, well, it's a combination of that. And reporters often say, well, it's really the dams, isn't it? We couldn't definitively answer that question. So further on, as this drought of 2019 played out, we met the Eyes on Earth team, and in April, the Eyes on Earth report was released, and that gave us a deep insight into the upstream impacts of China's dams for the first time, I think. Although previous research was released, the Eyes on Earth report showed that China's 11 dam cascade the report showed us that when and for how long and for how severe those dams were restricting or releasing water, and how that was impacting the downstream. Stimson's partnerships with Eyes on Earth sent us to the skies, sent my team to the skies to help provide more evidence to corroborate the findings of the Eyes on Earth team. We began to use satellite imagery to get to know the dams upstream and the reservoirs upstream, and eventually dams throughout the basin. And we were going there every day watching to see what these dams and reservoirs were doing using satellite imagery. So we could see with our own eyes how much they drained during these dry seasons, releasing water, and how much they filled their reservoirs during the rainy season, and how they were doing this at times when water downstream was severely needed. And, at some point during this process, I thought, perhaps there's a handheld phone application that someone like Guti, standing in the Golden Triangle along the river, could use to see and to know what's coming downstream to his Mekong school and to the communities there. And to think that we could use this technology to build out a near real-time reporting platform. And at the same time, we were taking our looks at these reservoirs to private consultations, to the Mekong River Commission, to other key stakeholders, and saying, this is exactly what's happening. These images corroborate and tell the story very much clearly in a kind of a synchronized way to what the Eyes on Earth study said. But that wasn't getting the information to all of you. And now we found a technologically feasible way to provide this information to you in the region, to Mekong watchers at a regular frequency that will help you understand the basin better, that will help you know these dams, know what's happening at those reservoirs, know how much water is in them, when they're releasing and when they're restricting water. And again, we're really grateful to the Department of State for taking up our idea with very little need for tweaking and providing the support to pilot this idea. One outcome of the consultations with both the Mekong River Commission and non-government stakeholders was the suggestion to make the platform expandable through participation by others, by creating something that others and researchers in the region can contribute to, and importantly, one that's transferable eventually to the region. So we have designed a platform that is filled with and informed with free and publicly available inputs. That means the things we use to generate our data is available to anyone. That makes this very easily replicable and verifiable. Also, all of the outputs that we produce are free for you to download. The data, the images, the visualizations, it's all there for you to use for your own purposes, that you can conduct research, you can investigate, you can find out what's happening in your basin. And if you're outside the basin, you care about the basin, this will help you tell deeper stories, make more impactful research, and improve transparency and environmental outcomes in the region. We have the full intent to pass ownership of this platform and the management eventually to local stakeholders when the platform is mature. And we want to start building partnerships now to help expand our research. This is a product for the region, and it should eventually be housed and managed in the region. This data is data for the region and from the region. So let's talk about what's in the platform. I'm going to share my screen here very quickly. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to be giving a walkthrough of the platform tonight. We're going to have other opportunities to do that. But first, where do you find it? Well, the platform is found on mekongwater.org, and that's the website of the Mekong Water Data Initiative from the Mekong US Partnership. And by scrolling down and clicking on Mekong Dam Monitor, you will be able to get access today into the Mekong Dam Monitor. And when you open it up, you see a homepage. And this homepage has up-to-date information on dams and impact areas. Dams, we're looking at 27 of them throughout the basin, all of the Mekong mainstream dams, and then all tributary dams higher than 200 megawatts. And importantly, we're looking at impact areas, places along the river that are familiar, that are kind of easy to connect with, to see what's happening along the river. Golden Triangle, Tai Lao border, and 2 spots on the Tonle Sap in Cambodia. On this homepage, you also see a few of Eyes on Earth's major contributions to the platform, and you're going to hear all about them really soon. Now, this map here, I think, is a major addition to information transparency in the region, and it provides a single window for looking and getting a feel for what's happening in the basin. So on the map, we can see marked with a V are our virtual gauges. I'm going to talk about what a virtual gauge is very soon. But we have 31 virtual gauges here. These are new additions for the first time, publicly made available, information on the conditions of reservoirs and environmental impact areas throughout the basin. But also there are some other icons here, such as dams that are owned and operated by Thailand's EGAT, that produce daily information about the operations of those dams. You can click on those icons and go right to those dams and see what's happening there. This is what a responsible, transparent government is doing for its country and for the rest of the basin. Laos is doing the same thing with EDL Gen and the dams that are wholly owned by EDL Gen. So we brought them in here. The same goes for 22 gauges along the river from the Mekong River Commission. And China has just added 2 stations on its portion of the upstream from the Lansong Mekong Water Resources Center, publicly available. We've linked them in here. So you can go to this map and find out what's happening at the basin at any time by clicking on our virtual gauges or by the gauges information presented by other stakeholders in the region. Now, what's a virtual gauge? This is Stimson's major addition to the to what we're providing here in the region. And we think it has actually global impacts. We've come up with a way to use open source data with confidence and accuracy to find and measure estimations of above sea level estimates of bodies of water, rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. And I want to be clear that these are estimates. We're moving, and we fully acknowledge that we are walking into an arena where there has been no data before, where upstream data has been kept in a black box. But we have come up with a way, and you can learn more about that process through our methods page on how we have confidence that these estimates at the virtual gauges are within plus or minus 1 meter of error. So we're really proud of this accomplishment of the creation of a virtual gauge. And now I'm just going to use the platform to tell you a very quick story about what's happening in the Mekong this year. So as Assistant Secretary Stillwell mentioned, the Tonle Sap has been reaching extremely low levels. So if we go on the platform to Kampong Kleng Fishing Village, which is a village along the Tonle Sap that relies on fishing for its livelihood, and click on our operations, curves, and time series, we can indeed see that 2020 was the worst year of the years that we have conducted research for low levels at the Tonle Sap. So low that it's several meters lower than previous lows. And you can explore these images further to look at satellite imagery of the lake, as well as gain other information about this particular site. And the same story can be told for Pak Chom on the Thai Lao border, where Pak Chom in 2020 reached extremely low levels during the early months, and then has fallen again to extremely low levels at its current state. Now, what are some of the drivers? Now, Alan Bassis is going to talk more about some of the drivers very soon, looking at some of the climate indicators. But we believe that you can use this platform to get a feel for how and when upstream dams are impacting these results that we're seeing. So I'm going to take you to the Xiaowan Dam, and we can again, for the first time, this is information that people really have never seen before, like what the reservoir looks like, how large it is. This is a reservoir that has a mainstream tail and a tributary tail that is almost 100 kilometers long. It's one of the tallest dams in the world. And the Chinese actually call it the tap of the Mekong, the longtou if you speak Chinese, the faucet. We can see the tap at work by looking at years of data and seeing that it drains its reservoir during the dry season and then recharges during the wet season. And 2020 was certainly no exception. We can single out 2020 to see that it drained to some of its lowest levels ever and then recharged during the wet season, during a time when the downstream was really suffering through drought, through an anomalously dry wet season. This dam, which restricts about 9 billion cubic meters of water, or 9 square kilometers of water, when it goes from its base up to its top, held all that water back. And the same was repeated at Nojadu downstream, the bigger dam. We can see Nojadu going from its lowest level and recharging through this year, holding that water back. And Nojadu's restrictions are much larger than what Xiaowan does. And together, they, along with a cascade, are operating in a way that are restricting water for hydropower production, or releasing water for hydropower production. And this is where I'm going to end. I'm going to pass off to Alan very soon. But we can use our cascade analysis to look at what's happening in the upstream, a full view of these 11 cascade hydropower dams, to see that at a point during the summer, the lower reservoir at Xiaowan begins to restrict its outlet, begins to fill again, and everything around that, all the dams upstream begin to adjust and slow their water flow. And then just a few weeks later, both Xiaowan and Nojadu are continuing to restrict their outlets, and they fill the reservoirs up. And if you cycle through these slides, you'll see a full picture of those reservoirs filling. That's water that should be coming downstream if the river were running at its natural flow rate. So I'm going to end here and then pass off to my partner, project co-lead, Alan Bassis, to have him tell some stories about what the Eyes on Earth products can tell us on the Mekong Dam Monitor. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And it's a pleasure and even an honor to be part of this project and the goals that we've been working on, and even more so to accomplish the things that the Dam Monitor is revealing to the larger population right now. This is a culmination of decades as a climatologist, and as a researcher, there was always something bigger, greater, more meaningful to do than to just perform research. It's to do something that touches the world, touches people's lives. And this has been an opportunity to bring so many years of experience and training into something that can hopefully be meaningful and bring about transparency so that empowers the people that are impacted by the flow of the river, that want to maintain the integrity of the river, to help them understand how we can work together. The most important form of cooperation is openness and discussion. Human beings are phenomenal in reaching solutions when they work together. So our goal here is to promote cooperation, knowledge, information, and solutions. So with that said, what are some of the things that we can see? And I'm going to try to share my screen as well. I know that we're running a little bit tight. It doesn't look like I have the capacity to share my screen.
Alan, if you could just tell me what to do, I will drive.
Okay, we've done that before, so we'll do it again. And we'll start with the time series. I wanted to show both the time series of Qianchen and Yantian. So let's start with kind of our sequence of work together. We started with the gauge at Qianchen first, because that was the one that had the biggest impact from the major dams upstream. And we wanted to see if this wetness index that Claude Williams and I have been developing since the turn of the century, 20 years now, has value. The wetness index has always been a peculiar product scientifically. It's not precipitation, it's not snowmelt, it's not a measure of soil moisture, it's not how much water is in the canopy or on the canopy. It's a combination of all of that. So when I've tried to describe it, it's difficult. And when people try to understand what the product is, since it's an amalgamation, a combination of so many different factors, frequently people didn't understand how to interpret it. But because it is so many things at once, we thought that it would be a wonderful integrator of how much water is in the basin, whether it's snow melt, glacial melt, or recent precipitation, and how that water is accumulating and then flowing downstream in the main stem of the river. So we worked together with the State Department originally to see if this product indeed has value. And we calibrated on a time of relatively natural flow. And we saw that it explained about 90% of the variability. So if Brian's driving, he can show that during the period 96 to about 2001 is when we calibrated the model, because that was the best representation between the Manwan Reservoir being established and then the Da Sha Shen with around 2002. So we tried to find a window that represented the most natural conditions of the river, and the model worked out quite well. What was most surprising, and to us, because we didn't know so much about the Mekong at that time, we're certainly learning through all our cooperation with our colleagues there, that a major drought was developing in 2019. And we saw a major reduction in flow from the upper Mekong basin during that time. And so then, before we leave this slide, we wanted to also see if those impacts are seen further downstream. So Brian, why don't you slide out from like 2001 to the end, and we can see after the Najadu Dam, the major dam that holds more water than all the other reservoirs on the river combined, was established around 2012, the impacts to the river by the dam. And you could see the lack of water. But more importantly, you can see the irregular flow, the unnatural flow that is coming through the dam that is not representative of the rhythm of the river and the greatness of the river in its annual cycle of dry during the basically December through June, and then wet through July through November. The river had been perturbed and altered from its natural state. But in 2019, something happened very unusual, and we saw it again in 2020. We saw that the natural rhythm of the river, the wet season, was almost missing. So then we started looking at anomalies to see what was happening in the larger basin, not just in what was happening upstream. So Brian's going to switch over to our capacity to monitor during that time. And we can measure a number of products on this page. We can measure wetness, surface wetness. We can measure precipitation as derived from satellite. We can measure surface temperature as derived from satellite, and we can measure snow cover. We put 3 of them up at a time, and you can cross compare both in time and against products. So I wanted to show, Brian asked me to tell a little story. So I'm going to have him drive, and we're going to keep the one on the far left as wetness on week 50, leave that one alone. The one in the middle, we're going to bring to wetness as well, instead of precipitation, and we're going to bring that to week 45. So year 2020, and we're going to go to week 45. And then we're going to go over to the third one, since we can bring 3 up at a time, and we're going to leave it. We're going to go to wetness again, leave the year the same, and we're going to go to week 40. And we're going to see some of the dynamics and some of the anomalies in the river. I'm going to have to get rid of my picture of all the people there because it's blocking some of my view. Maybe you can slide the image up a little bit so that I can see it a little better. Thank you. So what you can see in basically the end of September and October is you see what Brian was alluding to. You're seeing the severe drought in the Delta. That dark red means that less than 5% of the time is it that dry at those locations at this time of the year. So we're talking about a severe drought. And you can see it both in the Delta, and you can see it in the Tonle Sap, and you see the residual dryness in Northeast Thailand, because you're seeing that it was much drier earlier in August and such. In fact, it was another very dry year in Northeast Thailand. But you can see the residual impacts of the lack of water from upstream, where you can see the colors are blue, so there's no deficiency of water in the upper basin. But there is a deficiency of water in Thailand, and the compounding consequence of the lack of water from the upper basin and the drought that occurred in Northeast Thailand and adjoining Laos had a severe impact on the Tonle Sap and the Delta. And so if we move over to the next plot, which is the one in the middle, you can see that Northeast Thailand increased considerably. There's still above average wetness in the upper basin, because you can see that everything is on the blue side. So things are becoming more normal, but the residual impact, and this is what I want to communicate to you, it takes time for the water to get downstream. Rivers have memory. And so the severe impact from weeks earlier is still not gone away in the lower Delta. It takes a long time for those impacts to disappear. So then we go another 5 weeks out. We go to the most recent week, which is December 6th through the 12th. And you can see that there's above average wetness across most of the basin. But yet the residual impact and the Tonle Sap and the Delta are still there. Basically months after the severity of the dryness in the upper basin occurred. And even though wetness is starting to actually build, and above average moisture is building in the basin, the impacts and the residual lag in the lower basin is still impacting the people in the Delta, and to some degree the Tonle Sap. So our ability to monitor the wetness and the river flow gives us an understanding of the amount of water and how it is going to be moving through the basin in the coming weeks and months, which gives us capacity to start building mitigation strategies, cooperation, and how to use the water more effectively. So I'm going to stop right there, and I know we want to move on to our panelists. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Hopefully you've raised some very key issues that I think will help people in using the monitor. And I'm sure many of you watching will have questions. I did say earlier, please feel free to post on Zoom. We've got some very interesting ones. However, we also are running deeply out of time. So hopefully we're going to try and do some quick questions that will combine several towards the end. But right now I'd like to very briefly introduce our expert panel, starting with Ambassador Pu Sotirak in Cambodia, Executive Director of think tank, the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace, and a former Minister of Mines and Energy. He'll be followed by Kunniwat Roykal, the Thailand-based chairman of the Mekong People's Council, a great character in Brian's book on the Mekong. Dr. Pon Suvarnaseng, assistant professor for global studies at Bentley University in Massachusetts, and a Lao hydropower expert and political economist. And then Ambassador Pham Quang Vinh, former Vietnamese ambassador to the US and a senior advisor to the Asia Group. So without any delay, I'd like to ask Ambassador Sotirak to kick off with his view on the monitor and its impacts. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Thank you very much, Gwen. And hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
It is my pleasure to be here today to take part in this launch of the new Mekong Dam Monitor. I have followed it with great enthusiasm, this new initiative from Stimson Center and Eye on Earth. Here in Cambodia, the Mekong and the hundreds and thousands of Cambodians who rely on the bounty of this great river have had an incredibly challenging year. Throughout 2020, Cambodia have experienced extreme drought. The river reached a record low for the second year running, with water level down by 2/3. Fish catches have dropped by over 70%, and the fish export have fallen down by 84%. These putting an enormous strain on the life of many Cambodian most vulnerable groups. This online conference could not come at a worse time, as Cambodia feel the impact of the slowing down of the economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which have resulted in many families returning to the subsistence traditional model to meet their nutritional need. At the core of that subsistence approach are the Mekong, the Tunle Sap, the fish stock. The dam monitor have already demonstrated its utility in making clear that reality here in Cambodia, depicting how the shoreline of the Tunle Sap have receded nearly 1 kilometer from where it would normally have been located. And we have heard extremely clear and well from the two co-lead, namely Brian and Alan, for their engineering discovery of this dreadful impact on Tunle Sap just now. Months of drought was subsequently followed by record-breaking rainfall and flooding, the latter exacerbated by the release of water in the upstream dam. Lack of sediment flow have meant that the riverbank and the home and businesses built along them are under increasing threat. It is in this context here in Cambodia that we see the Mekong Dam Monitor should be treated as a welcome sign for a transparent and accountable source of information that monitor the water level of storage reservoir of big dam along the Mekong main stretch and its tributary dams using remote sensing and satellite imagery. As such, the dam monitor is a vital resource for assessing data and facts that provide early warning of drought and flooding, such as that can be appropriately respond and be prepared. Life can be saved and sustained development remain. At the same time, I am confident that the new Mekong Dam Monitor will serve as a vital resource, both for the Royal Government of Cambodia as well as for scholars and analysts in the kingdom. The provisions of natural flow model demonstrating natural river flow absence upstream dam will provide a useful baseline and framework for Cambodia to develop its future policy concerning electricity supply and demand, one of the kingdom's most significant challenges for its future development. The inherent trade-off of further hydro development will come into shape and view, as well as the clearer understanding of both environmental and human costs that policymaker confronts. The dam monitor presents Cambodia and other fellow Mekong states with a unique opportunity to adhere to a genuinely data-driven approach in the future development of the Mekong-related policy here in the sub-region. By way of concluding, I should also note that the dam monitor provides much needed transparency, a keyword that has been repeated throughout the previous speaker. This fundamental as Cambodia and all Mekong states continue to negotiate the challenging path to determine the future of water governance. I am confident that I can speak for many of my colleagues here in Cambodia in welcoming this essential initiative. We very much looking forward to further rolling out the dam monitor and looking forward to working with Stimson Center to facilitate increased use across the wide range of institutions in Cambodia. Finally, I offer my sincere congratulations to the co-project co-lead, namely Mr. Brian Eiler from Stimson Center and Alan Bassett from Eyes on Earth and their entire team for this new and viable dam monitor initiative to safeguard the future of the mighty Mekong and the surrounding region. And I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thanks, Ambassador Sotirak. We'll hopefully come back to you with questions. Second, I'd like to turn to Kun Niwat Roykau, the Thailand-based chairman of the Mekong People's Council, and a great figure that has fought and won some great victories for people along the Mekong in recent times. Over to you, Kun Niwat.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Niwat Roykau. I am a chairman of Chiang Khong Conservation Group and director of Mekong School, Institute of Local Knowledge. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am pleased to speak on very important event for Mekong Dam Monitoring Program launch. It has been over 2 decades already that the first dam was built on the Lansang Mekong Basin. At the moment, there are about 11 dams in China and 2 dams mainstream on the Rao PDR, which is Don Song and Sayaburi. If tributary dams are included, there are more than 60 dams in the river basin. There are a lot of dams already. It means the Mekong River is more half dead. As a local people who born and grow up on Mekong River, I observe that dam building has seriously changed the river ecosystem, nature flow, and seasonally cyclone has been changed. Wetlands are dying, fishermen are dying, the toilet sap stop flowing. Mekong Delta is sinking. When I was a kid, I remember well about my happy life, that we all live in harmony with nature. I remember that there are plenty of food. I remember a community gathering in boat racing, prabuk ceremony, kite correction, and riverbank garden. At the moment, life is hard. There are no more culture that we used to practice as Mekong River is dying now. The dam building imposes a huge environmental, economic, and social impact on the millions of the Mekong people. But the government wants to build more dams. I think this is not the time for dam building. It is already on old and obsolete technology. So if don't build them, how can we get energy? Now, I think it is time to talk about renewable energy that is already cheaper and cleaner. It is a time to talk about restoration and rehabilitation. How can we bring back Mekong River? The river that's one provides security in all dimensions in terms of food, culture, disaster protection, and livelihood to the local people. Now it is time to talk about the real and meaningful participation. Currently, the effect people has to sacrifice their liver, their life. Their concerns are not heard by the policymaker. There are many people that go hungry at night. The current plan making the poor get poorer, the rich get richer. Big company taking away resources from the poor. That's why from the Mekong People Council, we want our voice to be heard. We want to be part of decision making. We are asking for justice, transparency, and accountability in decision making. Mekong River belongs to everyone. We have to take care of it. Mekong River is not just belong to someone, some country, or some group. It is belong to the world. I think it's now time to talk about a new way for managing the river. The reason is that the exciting model such as PNPCA or MRC is led only by the governments and the powerful. The small local people like us does not include in their decision making. This is not a good river governance model because it's only looking at the profit. A good model should have 4P: planet, people, participation, and then profit. This is the only way that we can live together peacefully. This is the only way that sustainability can be achieved. That's why I propose the Mekong People Council. This is to provide a space so that we can discuss about ideas. Mekong People Council is an open space that includes everyone into the decision making. It is space that even the river or fish who cannot speak for itself is included. Lastly, I want to say that I support Mekong Dam monitoring too. This is because the Mekong People Council and Dam monitoring too share the same objective. I believe that both tools will increase people participation. It will improve transparency of water management. I hope that this tool will create a space to the poor people so that their voice is being heard and real participation will be implemented. ขอบคุณ Thank you.
Good Mark, thank you, good Niwat. And turning now to Dr. Pon Sivanaseng, Assistant Professor for Global Studies at Bentley University. Over to you, Dr. Pon.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to be on this panel. I'll start off by saying that I was born in the Mekong region and I've been studying particularly Mekong water politics for the last decade. I spent the last 2 years intensively working as a researcher on one of the UK and the world's foremost water, food, energy transdisciplinary modeling teams led by the University of Manchester, Cambridge University, and the University College London. So with that, I bring to my first observations at looking at the Mekong Dam Monitor, a couple, things I want to say first are, I think it's really commendable to use, readily available Google data, and what the MDM does, I think, which is really great, is that it provides, these, it provides not only the public, but, any other users, a bird's eye arc, an overview over, 12-month periods of surface water levels, and it claims, to use data from the MRC, EGAT, EDL, and China's Lansang Water Resources data. I'm not sure if the raw data will be available to scholars and other users. If the raw data does become available, I think that would be a great benefit. With that said, I think I want to make some caveats and some observations about the MDM in terms of the public, that this is one tool amongst many, and it's not definitive, right? That there are limits to reservoir and cascade analysis, and that this tool does need triangulation with existing scholarship and tools out there. On this panel, but also on the MDM, there aren't climate, meteorological, and atmospheric data scientists. And so, while I take that Alan's point is that 1996 to 2001 is the sort of standard average that you use for the model. When you look at, long-term climate data over the last 100, 200 years, it's important to integrate, as one example, it's important to integrate that atmospheric data as well as local level agricultural rainfall data, information from the substations at the subnational, national level. So I think this is one tool, which is great because it uses remote sensing and satellite imagery, which of course circumvent a lot of the nitty gritty, let's say, of local and ministerial data gathering, right? So it's important to, I think, use this as a tool amongst and with other existing and necessary tools out there. And I hope that this will forge more coalitions and discussions, not only amongst scholars and policymakers, but even amongst the very parallel initiatives, the US Mekong Initiative, the Japan Mekong Initiative, all the different bilateral and multilateral initiatives that have their own agendas and tools. And the last thing I would say, the last two things I would say, as a scholar and scientist, I'm a little bit more cautious, especially as somebody who's watched Mekong politics over the last 20 years as a professional, but also as somebody who's generationally of and from the Mekong. I'm slightly uncomfortable with the dominant upstream China narrative that is cloaked, behind the banner of data and data transparency. I spent the last 2 years along the Irrawaddy and the Mekong, where I faced as a scholar, I faced a lot of cynicism and difficulty as a scientist, based on, people's interactions and understandings of what they thought was data and the weaponization of data. So I think the usurpation of the term transparency in data discourses for geopolitical narratives is a very dangerous one, not only for the scientific community, but also for the region as a whole. I'll end on the last point here, which is where does the MDM, what do we do with it? What is it? What is the goal? How can it be a cooperative, or how can it be a useful tool, not only for stakeholders in the region, but the global stakeholders who are concerned about the Mekong. It would be interesting to hear more at some point about how Stimson plans to either hand over or deal with this monitor with the MRC, what the MRC's role is going to be. I want to sort of put this in context in that people are very concerned about Chinese dam building over the last decade, but the longer story about dam building in the Mekong is, a very technocratic and US and World Bank led one. And to the extent that we see the drought patterns in the last few years that Brian and Alan have discussed, I want to take a couple steps back and say that the exponential building of built dam infrastructure and the role of environmental impact assessments, these projects that were green lighted in large packages and portfolio packages, they have been driven by private financial interest in cahoots with state bureaucrats. And my concern, particularly now, is there have been waves of infrastructure building as a way to jumpstart or recycle both regional and international capital. After the Asian financial crisis, we saw a huge dam boom after '97. After 2008 and the Great Financial Crisis, we saw what we're now experiencing as the consequences of the Chinese stimulus in terms of infrastructure dam building. And so, I'm not optimistic that some of these private financial recycling infrastructure projects aren't going to happen post-COVID. So I think to the extent that we care about these types of reservoir politics, it's important to take a step back and integrate that into how can this be a preventive tool in understanding, how this links up with ultimately what are political questions that will require political answers and political settlements. Data and transparency is not to be politically weaponized, but at least to start a conversation about how did these drought patterns come to be? How, where does climate change stand to distribute risk more so and liability to some groups more than others? But ultimately, this is going to be a political settlement that needs to be negotiated.
Right. Well, thanks, Pon. That really put it out there with some very critical issues. And I think actually we should come back perhaps later to you, Brian and Alan, to respond to some of those extremely relevant points. Right now, I'd just like to turn to our final speaker on the panel, Ambassador Pham Quang Vinh, and also whether you have some thoughts on what Dr. Pon just said too, if you do, but carry on, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Just to say hello to you all. I'm right now in Hậu Giang, a province in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. So very, very happy to join this event. One key issue that has been highlighted is sustainability of the Mekong River. Certainly, it should be for all countries along the river, from upstream to downstream. So the key issue, sustainability, require both political and social economic partnership. And countries in the sub-Mekong region have been working among themselves and with partners in programs for the shared goal of sustainability, if we can call it. And very recently, the ASEAN has also raised the issue of the Mekong River to the whole region of Southeast Asia. And we also see the US and the Mekong countries has enhanced its cooperation and raised the level of cooperation to strong partnership. This is very much important as a way of mobilizing both political campaign and also policymakers as well as countries concerned in this very much important issue. And among the cooperation in the region, certainly we have been talking about collecting and sharing information. Very recently, China also said that it would also provide year-round information. But I don't think that all this has been comprehensive and that we need. So today's event to me is very significant, the launch of the Mekong Dam Monitor. The platform as designed is near real-time monitoring of dams and environmental impacts in the Mekong Basin, which is ensure, among other objectives, transparency and publicity, to me, is very much important. And also, this is for the first time policymakers and public can have a near real-time and more comprehensive picture of the Mekong hydrological conditions that have been a result of the impact of dams and climate. Data will be the starting point, as mentioned, but that will include also satellite imagery with wetness and precipitation data, GIS measurement, and more. And I think this is a starting point. And I agree with the previous speakers that the starting point can motivate policymakers to work together on how they will work out programs for the sustainable development and management of the Mekong River and its basin. I wish to share and highlight thereby some of the goals which are to me very important, that include creating incentives for transparency and data sharing, providing evidence-based information and condition and operation of the dams, the reservoirs, and the water flow in the Mekong basin, and have counter-inaccurate statements. This is very much important to provide a more comprehensive picture based on data and information, and that helps to interact with other sources of information, and including also countering inaccurate statements. And I also share the goal of the Monitor project that would empower stakeholders to make data-driven decisions. This is very much important, and increase understanding of the benefits of natural flows and reduce risks of ecological breakdown in the Mekong River. So the key was, as I understood from the project, will be data, publicity, transparency, near real-time data, accountability, and most important of all, trust for the stakeholders, especially the policy makers, to work together. And I believe that the Monitor will effectively help the work of countries in the region and their coordination with partners toward the shared goal of ensuring sustainability for the river and the basin. We therefore welcome the launch of the Mekong Dam Monitor. And again, I think we should encourage people to coordinate with the project and believe through the objectives of collecting and sharing data and ensuring transparency, that will help a lot achieving the goal of sustainability. So I think this is very much important, and I will be very much happy to continue the conversation at this seminar. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ambassador. And actually, thanks to all our excellent panelists for great insights. I'd like to now turn to some of the questions that have come in during this session and invite our panelists, project team, and others, keynoters, if you are staying on the call, to respond. I think one of the interesting questions that builds on the points raised by Dr. Pon, one comes, this is a combination, I think, from a couple of questioners. So they ask, the Mekong River Commission and now the Lanchang Mekong Cooperation Mechanism of China both provide some data now. What are the limitations to their data? And how does China's recent agreement to share some data impact that gap? And that might be a question for Brian and Alan, well, perhaps one of you. And please keep it short. We've got only about 7 minutes for questions.
Right. But thanks, Gwen. I'll take a quick shot at that. You know, we're with the Monitor, we're seeking to fill gaps of data that currently isn't measured and estimated, that can complement the work of the MRC, of the LMC, of any research organization that's doing hydrological modeling or collection of data and research in the basin. So we very much want to complement and again, fill those gaps. And as Dr. Pons said, we're one tool of many that can help with decision support, with information provision that can support capacity building and more informed negotiations. And also with the Mekong River Commission collects much more data than what the Mekong Dam Monitor does. And most of that is in situ physically collected data. And we think that combining that data, that deep warehouse of data with data on the monitor, again, provides a much more comprehensive picture. Now, China's contributions are 2 river gauges downstream of the Jinghong Dam. So it's showing a very small portion of river level. This is a great addition. It's never been done before. China should be commended for sharing this data and taking these steps forward. But there's a lot more to learn about what's happening upstream, and it really has to do with what the dams are doing, as well as other things that are happening on the river. Some of the criticism that came of the Eyes on Earth report, and this is answering another question in the list from April onward, was, well, it looks like you're saying more water is being held back than what those dams can hold. Well, we think that both can be true. That other things could be happening upstream, and this takes us into an investigation of knowing exactly how much water is being held back behind those dams versus what else might be happening upstream. So far, no definitive answers, but the monitor and its capabilities take you one step further in that that knowledge arena and for these investigative purposes.
Thanks very much. I wonder if either you or any of you would have a response to Pon's point about the sort of politicization or the weaponization of data. And I guess in this particular situation, it is virtually unavoidable.
Alan, would you like to take that?
Not
a softball, Alan, but happy to hear your thoughts.
A very quick one.
It will be very quick, because our goal, my goal, and I think as well as the entire team, is to not be political, is to provide tools and as we've heard, we're providing a very small subset of the knowledge that needs to be collected and distributed among all the shareholders, all the players in the Mekong. So I don't want to be in the realm of politics. I just want to be in the realm of promoting healthy discussion, information exchange, and really solutions. I'm an optimist. I think that when human beings come together and have a common goal and common information, they find answers that everyone is willing to say, yes, we're willing to work with you to reach these goals. So
right.
I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. We've got quite a few questions, so I'm going to actually put 2 out in quick succession and then sort out who would answer them. We've got a good question from Dr. John Ward of the Mekong Region Futures Institute. Can the monitor combine and parse the effects of Chinese mainstream dams, Lao mainstream dams, and tributary dams? I know the point was well made, I think, also by the Assistant Secretary of State and one of you, the vast proportion of all this data we're talking about stemming from 2 of the most massive dams in the upstream. But that is a point worth mentioning about the possibilities for combining and parsing those effects. And secondly, should we address that, or will I maybe go on for the second question? I think this is also a very important question from Tyler Roney. How can we use all this data to track the effects of climate change and pass that from effects of the dams? So perhaps first on this issue of combining data. Brian, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think Alan also has some thoughts on that too. But this is why the focus is not just, obviously it would be kind of irrational just to focus on China's dams. We have 27 dams that we are monitoring throughout the basin. There are more dams in the lower basin that we're monitoring than the Chinese upstream dams. And together, again, you'll get a picture of the cumulative impacts of those dams now. And by looking at this elevation data, you can get a feel for which dams are restricting, which dams are releasing water, where the water is at any one time. What we don't have is volume. It's difficult to measure volume. It's not impossible. It's more difficult to measure volume with the publicly available inputs. But we're going to stick to our goals of using publicly available inputs, and maybe as processes are refined, we'll be able to get to volume of water behind the dams. And when we can do that, then yes, you can figure out, parse out what the Lao impacts are, what the China dam impacts are, the Cambodia dam, the Vietnam dam impacts are.
Right.
Climate?
And well, maybe, Alan, if you want to deal with the climate change, then I'd like to maybe a final question or two that might involve our panelists.
Alan, you're muted.
Very quick answer to that. There's two ways that this data could help, and I agree with Dr. Pond that there is no one data set that is complete, and it's a collaboration among many scientists, many sources of information that gives us the insight that we need. Yet, two places where the wetness index and the monitor could provide information is trends. We have almost 30 years of data, so we can look at the impacts over these 3 decades to see how the climate is changing. And then the other thing that's so important is variability. How is variability changing, and then how does that impact the society along the river as well as the ecology?
Right. Thank you very much. I think at this point, because I know Brian wants to raise what's coming next and discuss a media event. So I would just like to give a very big thanks to our panelists, Ambassador Vin, Dr. Pon Kunniwat, and Ambassador Sotirak, as well as our keynotes, Dr. Somkiat and Assistant Secretary Stilwell, as well as, of course, Brian Eiler and Alan Bassis, and also your team over there. So I will turn to you, Brian, for concluding remarks, and also to apologize to everyone watching who asked questions. They are some excellent questions that we didn't have time for, but as Courtney said, she will share them with panelists. If you are very interested, you can contact Stimson. So over to you, Brian, and thank you very much.
And thanks, Gwen. Just a few wrap-up points on where do we go from here? Well, the platform is live. It's there for you. It's there for you to use. It's there for you to peruse. As you look through it, you'll find methods. You'll find explanatory points on what is on the monitor and how we came up with these indicators and how you can do it yourself. So we're now giving it to all of you to do your work on the Mekong. Not saying our work is done, but our job is to make sure that the processes are accurate and show that our processes are through explaining our methodologies. So how do you use the platform? Well, we're going to be doing some teaching activities here over the next month or so, reaching out to groups in the region for public and private engagements. The next one will be on 48 hours from now on Friday morning, Mekong time at 9 a.m. And that will be for a media walkthrough at a press conference. And we'll send that press release out very soon. Please come to that. Others are welcome to attend to that on the record, very informal walkthrough. And also in the coming months, we're going to release local language versions of the platform. That would be Lao, Khmer, Vietnamese, Thai, and Burmese and Chinese versions of the platform for local use. And eventually, before we get too far into 2021, there'll be a smartphone application. That means that people along the river will have actually citizen science capabilities to contribute data to the platform, which we will verify before we publish it on the platform. So again, thank you very much. Gwen, do I want to turn it back to you for a final word, or shall we just let everyone go?
Well, I think, you guys over in America are probably dying of fatigue, so I won't say anything more except to just make the point that it was just a wonderful selection of views from throughout the region, and as you said, spanning the world. And I hope we have opportunity to discuss more of some of the very interesting points raised. So thank you everyone for watching, and good night, good afternoon, and good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.